Right, so let's move on to our calibration subject this week. We've been doing this for a little while now. Jules has been waiting patiently to tell us all about this week's subject. So, Jules, we're going to start at the beginning, basically, and work our way out and explain to people why things are done a certain way and why they should consider calibration and so on. So what is it you want to talk about this week?
Well, as you say, it's quite a simple concept. I call it farm to fork. Why should you calibrate? Well, because all the content you see has been produced on calibrated monitors. If you go to a standard studio, you'll find dozens of monitors there, and they all have to be set up to a particular standard, and to ensure consistency of image right from the very beginning, from conception through to the end goal, which is to get it to your display. And I don't know where we would be if we didn't have those standards and they weren't enforced. If you want to produce content for Netflix, BBC, whatever, you have to conform to those standards. You have to be working on a calibrated display. The director of photography, the colorists, everybody has to be able to trust what their eyes are seeing, and to be able to switch from one monitor to another and to be able to see the same thing. So when we go, I've just had the call from a wee Scottish production again to go up there and to calibrate on set, and they'll be wanting all of their monitors calibrated properly with a spectroradiometer, colorimeter, all the software to the standards that are specified by the industry. And otherwise, it'll be a right dog's dinner, wouldn't it?
It would. If you think of something like James Cameron's Avatar, and you think about how many people actually work on that production.
Yeah.
So if you've got all your special effects and you've got all your artists and everybody else working on it, and all the monitors were just set to their personal preference and what they thought looked good, I think you'd have a few shades of blue by the time you got to the final.
You definitely would.
Final
at least 50.
Yeah. So the idea is, and this is why I think people misunderstand calibration, because they say, well, I'm not going to use filmmaker mode on my TV. I'm going to get my TV calibrated. You're talking about the same thing. If all the TVs look the same, how would I pick the best one? Well, that's why your TV has standard mode and vivid mode and all the rest of it, because the point of calibration is for everything to look the same, and the reason why it should look the same is because that's how the director shot it, that's how it was put together, that's how it was graded, and this is how it's being delivered. Now, that's not to say that within that envelope of the standards that the colorist can't add more pink to somebody's skin tones and orange shoes and whatever. They still have a lot of artistic expression within that envelope. And I think this is what people misunderstand. They don't realise that there is this envelope that says you can't go over this and you can't go over that, but anything inside that envelope you can do. And as long as your TV is set to that same envelope, that it can't exceed certain points, and red should look this, and you're going to see exactly how it should look. So if it's Steven Spielberg's War of the Worlds, it's completely desaturated and over the top and everything's clipped out, it was still shot in that envelope. And as long as your TV's set to that envelope, you're going to see it as it's intended to be seen. As soon as you start adding personal preference on top of that and saying, well, I think filmmaker mode looks green or yellow or it's dull or whatever, you're completely changing the content, you're completely changing the way things are seen. So to get back to your point, Jules, back to the studio, back to where it all begins.
For sure, yeah. I mean, I calibrate for colorists, producing content for all these big streaming giants like Netflix, and they have to have their display calibrated, and there are specifications that run throughout the whole industry if they want to submit their content. Not just that, also things to do with their room as well, their viewing environment. Netflix specify according to the SMPTE regulations that you should have a surround light level of 5 nits, and you should be a certain distance from your screen, that it should be illuminated, so they're not sitting in black rooms, and it's not totally dark. I mean, they are dark rooms, but there is that light, the bias light behind the display, and it's specified to be D65, not disco. It's not like Close Encounters. It's these lights that you see. So they're calibrated bias lights to a specific white point and a specific light output as well, and also making sure that the background that is you've not got red walls. So when the bias light's on, it's not a red wall, because that shifts your perception of color. So there'll be walls in that studio according to a certain exactly the same color temperature, and you can get the color swatches. It doesn't have to be black, but it has to be a certain color temperature as well, so that everything is matched up within that. So that the colorists' eyes are not being distorted when they're working on the content. So it is it's a highly regulated environment, and when we don't turn up and just dial it in by eye, or I don't turn up, calibrators don't turn up to those studios with a bunch of settings and punch them in from one I did yesterday. That doesn't happen.
It's an important point you make there, because if you hire a professional calibrator, somebody who says they are a professional calibrator, and they turn up and they might have all the gear and so on, and set the gear up, but then think, oh, that doesn't look right, and take the remote and then set it by eye, that calibrator doesn't know what they're doing. They're not setting that TV up to the standards. And I have heard a number of stories of professional calibrators in this country doing that. If your calibrator does that, ask them what they're doing and why they're not setting to the standards.
Exactly, because the very definition of the word calibrate, and it is used loosely on forums, because you can't blame people; they're not in the professional game. But to calibrate literally means to adjust to a known or set standard. In this case, the standards, SIMPTE and other regulatory bodies that have laid down. You cannot do that by eye. I wouldn't trust my own eyes to do that. I have my instrumentation for that purpose, and they're far more sensitive than my own eyes are. And your brain's a funny thing. It does weird things at times in relation to all sorts of stimuli. So we have to trust our instrumentation.
Yeah, excellent. So we're starting right at the beginning. We're starting at the studio. This is where Jules has a lot of experience. And, calibration is there for a reason. We don't just make this up, and when we put YouTube videos out saying set your TV to filmmaker mode, it's not because it's the dullest mode and these standards have been around from 1990 or whatever, and the 30-year-old, and why should we stick them? You stick them if you want to see content as it's supposed to be seen. These standards do exist, and it goes all the way back to the camera that's being filmed, and that camera still works in that envelope. Everything is captured within that envelope. And it's the same all the way through, and if you want to see it at the end of the day as it's supposed to be seen and as it's been worked on, then that's what you're aiming for with calibration. So thanks, Jules, for your input this week on that. It is appreciated. Of course, we're going to cover different subjects every week, and if there's something in particular with calibration that you're not sure of or you don't really understand and you want us to go into it in some kind of depth, then of course leave us a note in the thread. I know that Jules reads the forums when he's not too busy and catching up on things, so if there's anything that pops up, then we'll make a note of it and we'll come back to it in the next podcast, and we'll try and discuss that. But for the next few weeks, we're going to take you on the journey from the source when it's first captured all the way through to what a calibrator should be doing when they come to your house, when you pay for their services and so on. So thanks very much for that, Jules.